Hey there, in this lecture video we are going to create the Hello World application. First thing you're going to do is you're going to go into Visual Studio and you are going to click File, New Project. Don't be alarmed, I already have one open up, but we're going to start a brand new one, so you might not have any that already exist to open up. First step is to configure your new project, and you're going to give it a name. I'm going to call this one my Hello World app. Company domain, vinu.edu. And then project location, this is where it is going to be stored. If you wanted to put it someplace else, you would click on the box right there and pick a different location for it to be stored. And if you haven't noticed by now, yes, I'm using a Mac. You might be using Windows, but everything should work just the same, so I think we'll be fine. All right, once you get those three things figured out, then you click Next. The next step is to select the form factor. I talked about different form factors in the lecture video. We're going to be sticking with phone and tablet. And for now, I'm going to leave the minimum SDK here at Android 5.0 Lollipop. And again, this is going to vary depending on what versions are out there at the time you're working on this code, as well as what minimum device you want to program for. I'm going to click Next. Then I need to add an activity, and for this one we're just going to keep it simple, and we are going to add an empty activity. Click Next. Next step in the process is to customize the activity. We have to create one, and we can just leave it at main activity, so leave it at the default and click Finish. Then what's going to happen is the IDE is going to do the build process behind the scenes, and you'll see why it takes a little bit of time for it to configure. But what's going to happen is your IDE is going to open up, and it's still going to be building. You'll see the status bar running at the bottom. So mine still has a few little red squiggly lines, so don't be alarmed yet. Those will hopefully all go away here when it gets done in the build process. But you'll notice, and when you run your applications too, this part of the IDE down here, this is where all your messages are going to be going. So you can kind of get a status update on build procedures and processes. If you're thinking something's taking a little bit too long, it could be still in the build phase or mode there. So this is the Android Studio IDE. Over on the left-hand side, this is the project view. It contains all the source code members that make up the Android application itself. Few things just to point out off the top. First of all, in the subfolder, so we have the app folder. If we break that down, there is a subfolder of the manifest folder called android.xml. If you double click on it and take a look at it, it looks kind of scary. This Android manifest.xml file will be in every Android application that you build. It holds the keys to everything about your Android application and keeps it all right there in a file. So every program you create will have one of those. The next one is the Java folder. Under there, you will actually find the main activity that you created. So the main activity that you by default, you just left it called main activity. This is what got generated, and this is Java code. So there'll be Java code for every activity or screen that we put together in our Android applications. And you can double click on these source code members to bring them up, and to close them out, you'll just simply X them down. Alright, the next thing I wanted to show you is in the res folder. And in the res folder, there is a source code member called activity_main.xml. When you click on that, what's going to happen is you're going to bring up the rendering of the emulator here, and it's going to show you what the actual app is going to look like on the device itself. So that's kind of cool. You can switch between, so up here at the top, I'm on activity_main.xml, that's what's opened at the top. I can switch between the text view and the design view. So I don't know about you, but the design view looks a whole lot less intimidating. When I'm in design view, I can have access to the component tree. The component tree is going to break everything down. And you'll notice how in Android Studio, everything's sort of in a tree fashion. You can expand, collapse things, but it does help you understand how everything is constructed. So within our relative layout, then we have the different controls that are going to be there. So right now we just have the Hello World. Then we can scroll down through the properties. So down here, the properties for the actual controls themselves, that's where we'll be going and using that as we change properties about the controls within our application. First thing I'm going to actually have you change is up here at the top, the virtual device to render what layout we want to render with. We're going to change that to 5 right now. And you'll notice how you change that, the screen will render a new image for you depending on the device that you select. The next thing I want to show you is another source code member over here in the project view, and it's actually underneath the subfolder called values underneath the res folder. So res folder, then values. There's a folder called, or a source code member called strings.xml. If you double click on that, it's going to show you the strings that are in your application. Now you can go directly onto the emulator and change things, but the whole idea behind this strings.xml file is it's sort of like a big code table, and it's going to provide links to the actual strings themselves. So being coded like this, it's going to allow the application to translate text very quickly. So if we needed to run our application in a different language, it could go to this code table and translate it very quickly, because everything is using pointers and it's just pointing to the strings instead of hard coding the values on the application itself. The easiest way to change it, you could click in here and change, but the easiest way to do it is to click on Open Editor. Here you can click on the actual string value that you want to change. Every string value here is going to have a key and a default value. So as I click on that and highlight it, you'll notice that you can actually change information down here about the default values. So I'm going to change this to hello. This is my Hello World app. And to close it out, I'll just hit X. And then if I click back onto my main activity, so activity_main.xml file, my rendering, you'll see that it shows the change that I just made. Hello, this is my Hello World app. Alright, the last thing to do is to run the application. So up at the top there at the IDE, I'm going to select Run App. My Android device management window is going to come up, so my virtual device. Options are going to be here, and I'm going to select Nexus 5. If you don't see one, you can click the Create Emulator, and it will run you through the scenarios for hardware. Alright, Nexus 5, going to click OK. Click OK. Then depending on your workstation, this could be quick or this could take a little bit. My computer I'm using, it usually gets there. It doesn't take too long, but it sometimes sounds like a jet plane as it's trying to get everything processed. So again, notice down there at the bottom, it's going through the build process, and it's going to build my application, and it has to push it out and work with the emulator to get it actually pushed out and executed up in the emulator. So that might take a little bit. But once it does that, what you'll see down in your dock, or if you're down in your Windows task, you will see the instance of the emulator created. So it will create just another process that will run on your machine, and it will show you what your application is going to look like in the actual device itself by using that emulator. And when the emulator comes up, you will see the finished application as it would be on an Android device. Enjoy!